just before I hand over to our first speaker, who is Dudley, and is going to talk for half hour to 40 minutes, can we just have a moment's silence for the addicts who haven't made it and who might still be out there suffering? Thanks. Okay, thank you, and it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Dudley. Thank you, Dudley.
I'm Dudley, I'm an addict. And I'm going to stand up because I hate not being able to see people. I didn't know where to start. And the theme of this convention is service. And I think in the course of my time I've had most service positions. I've been engaged in virtually every kind of service in the fellowship, some of which suit me and some of which don't. And my story is one of two fellowships. I was thinking while it was coming up, in the 50s and 60s, halfway, say from 55 to 66 something, I was an alcoholic. And then my body packed up, and in those days they couldn't call it a treatment centre, they called it a drying out place. And it was also a changeover in London. Earlier at the men's meeting, they were talking about identity and who we were and what constitutes a man, and I never really understood what constituted a man. I was very confused in my identity, and in order to drink, I masqueraded as an Irishman. It made sense. It made sense that way. And I'm an actor by trade, and luckily, and having had lots of practice, I got to play some really good Irish parts. And so that paid off in the end. But then, towards the end of my drinking, I looked out at the pub and I saw these amazing people going past called hippies. They seemed to be having a much better time. So I made the swap over. And so I say, partly because my body wouldn't stand the booze anymore. And also they just seemed to be having a better time, and certainly doing far less work. And so I became a sort of hippie. So really, I mean, what happened was that I had two habits. And I wanted to try and prove to my business that I was a stand-up sort of a bloke. So I started going to meetings at the Mother Fellowship. I was referred to it as the Mother Fellowship because calling it the other fellowship is demeaning. I'm not terribly keen on red nose and bedwetting either. It's okay if it's meant in the right humour. But when I first came around NA, which was 33 years ago last August, I don't know why I get the applause, NA should get the applause. Maybe that's what it's about. And when I first came round, I was in America and I was working on a film, and I wanted to try to prove to the film company that I was a stand-up guy. So I let everybody know that I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 9 stone at the time, 9 stone 7 at the time. It does keep you thin, those fucking drugs. And I had these big opium-filled kind of eyes and sunken cheeks, and I thought I looked incredibly handsome. Everybody else thought I looked sick as a parrot. So I was a rather bad advertisement for the Mother Fellowship anyway. But as I say, just to prove that I was a stand-up guy, I was in the West Indies, and I went to... something went wrong with the film, we had to go to Miami. This was about 12 years after that. 12 years I've been using. And I was really coming to the end of it. My ex-old lady was leaving with the children. She changed her hairstyle and her dress without asking me. She'd been having it off with some geezer who had a boat down the road. And I realised that the game was up. And they went back to England and I went to Miami. And I went to a meeting of the Mother Fellowship, and people, and this was back, as I say, it was 33 years ago, people were calling themselves alcoholics and addicts, or addicts and alcoholics. And I knew then that the game was up. I'd never thought of myself as being an addict. The fact that I lived on drugs for 12 years or so, the fact that I'd already lost one family through booze and I'd lost another family through drugs, and fucked up my job again. It didn't occur to me. But at the end of that meeting, I asked people what they were talking about. And they told me, and they said, we'll pick you up and take you to a meeting of NA. And I said, what's NA? And they said, Narcotics Anonymous. I said, well, what's that got to do with me? I'm not an addict. And they said, well, what have you been using? And I told them, and they said, well, how long? I said, about 12 years. Yeah, that constitutes a habit. I said, and I felt very proud, because it was kind of hip going to NA. It was kind of old-fashioned going to the Mother Fellowship. So I felt kind of hip, and especially being in Miami Beach, the drug capital of America at the time. But I was taken downtown in Miami City and taken to my first NA meeting. And it was about a quarter, the group was about a quarter the size of this, in a little clubhouse that's since defunct. And the moment I walked in, I just knew, although I was about a generation older, I've always been a generation older than most people in NA, maybe 2 generations now, but I realised that I was at home. I can't explain it, but I knew immediately that I was utterly at home. And I started to weep. And I was very, very paranoid and very suspicious. And when they said, hugs, not drugs, motherfucker. I was standing next to a Miami Beach cop who was about as big as some of the big guys here, 6'7". And he's holding his hands out and he said, they call me the Huggy Bear. And as I say, I was extremely paranoid, and to me, sex, love meant sex, you know. I didn't know about being loved. And as he approached me to hug me, I thought, what happens if I get, you know... There were children in the room. What happens if I get a little bit, you know, get a popcorn on? They'll know that I'm some kind of sex mechanic and he'll beat me up and throw me out. As it happened, I got hugged. I didn't get horny. Thank God. And I began, that was my first introduction to love, especially amongst men, you know, just straightforward. And I don't know. It was an extraordinary time. Somebody mentioned an earlier meeting, there was no recovery text then, but just a few white books and some pamphlets. And on the table there was a pamphlet. There's that one that says, we don't know what you used or how much, or who your connections were, but only what you want to do about it and how we can help. That absolutely did it for me, because I always felt guilty because I wasn't using the right drugs either. You know, I obviously had to be wrong about my drug usage, because I was wrong about everything else. And then he went on to describe me. And I really did not know that anybody on this good earth knew what was going on in here, except me. And to see it spelt out on a simple pamphlet, it broke my heart and mended it at the same time. I kept weeping. I couldn't help it, and I kept getting hugged by members of both sexes. And at the end, we had poker chips rather than key rings. And I took a white poker chip back to the hotel And the next morning, when I went out to buy a paper, it came out in my hand with the money, and I burst into tears again. The guy looked at me as if it was a kind of lunatic. And I began to get well. Came back to England and brought a few pamphlets. And I said to them, what am I going to do when I get back to England? I've been going to the Mother Fellowship on and off for years. And they said, when you go back to the Mother Fellowship, just say, my name is Dudley, I'm an alcoholic and an addict, and I'm clean and sober here today through the good grace of my higher power, the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. And I thought, if I do that, they're going to say, bloody actors, always drama queens. Get out of here. They didn't say that at all. They said, it's extraordinary. They said, you've been around for, on and off, in and out, for 10 years. You never got well. You helped a lot of other people on the way, yet you never got well yourself. Tell us about it. It was the opposite reaction to what I'd always expected. And so I told them about it. And after a year, exactly a year to that day, somebody came up and gave us a starter pack for an NA meeting, told us where the room was available, and we started our first meeting, and I entered into my first bit of service for NA. I had to, because I think there were only 5 of us at the time. And one of us became a secretary. I was going to be tea boy. Tea and coffee. I remember staying awake in the middle of the night in a panic because I didn't know how to make Nescafé. Or I thought I didn't. I thought I'd mess it up. This is what a state I was in, you know. As it turned out, I did know how to make Nescafé, and I did know how to put a tea bag in. And then came the time we swapped it around, and we just had these pamphlets, and we didn't know really how to run an NA meeting, so we just read these 5 pamphlets every week. And then we began to have a secretary, and then we began to speak, and then a lot of people from the Mother Fellowship turned up to check out the girls, because we always had cooler girls. No, we did. We always had much cooler girls than AA. And they came, and some of the guys hung around. They didn't hang around for very long. But NA began slowly to grow. I remember the first London convention was, I should think, smaller than this, when it was in Chelsea. And we were all a bit mad, and it was near the Charter Clinic, which was full of sort of junkies. And they were all coming up and standing up on the stage and saying, hey, I'm a junkie, and everybody would clap. Which was, it was okay, but it was exclusive. Because not every addict is a junkie. Although every junkie is an addict. I think so. I think you might be in the job description, really. But we had a hell of a lot to learn. And I found that the one thing that causes rage in me is committees. Other people having a point of view. I just wanted to kill everybody. And I think in early NA, we all wanted to kill each other. There was such rampant rage going on amongst this relatively small group of people. It's a wonder that we all came out alive. It came bloody close to it. I got attacked with a plumber's hammer by a guy once because I promised him I'd come to court, and he came out from court, and it never occurred to him because he got into my car and he accused me of not being there, and he attacked me with a plumber's hammer. And of course I'd been there. I wouldn't have been there to pick him up if I hadn't been. He hadn't seen me. He was so determined that I wouldn't be there. He hadn't seen me. It was so weird. You know, I was treasurer when we got about 3 meetings going. I was treasurer for 3 meetings. And I had this big drawer in my flat full of small change. and lots of little slips of paper called Iona slips, I-O-N-A, the gas bill, the rent. So I do promise you it was all eventually paid back. But I began to see the sense of being treasurer of only one meeting at a time. I became secretary. I did a lot of stuff. H and I was fairly primitive in those days. There was still, don't take her away on my account. Honestly, don't take her away on my account. She's fine. Hello, baby. You can give it to me if you like. Put her in my car. No, I think the important thing about service is that one has to find out what suits one. We're all individuals, and some of us are better at doing one thing or the other. Tea, in those days, ashtrays. I suppose we still have outdoor ashtrays, but all the different jobs. And as I say, I was a murderer at committees. I was all right on subcommittees, but I couldn't deal with the bigger stuff. I'm much better at personal one-to-one relationships, sponsoring, being sponsored, helping on literature committees and stuff like that, graphics and things like that. And I don't know how we managed to get through it, but after a few, very relatively short time, we had the first World Convention in London at the Wembley Arena, which is extraordinary when you think of a new fellowship. And a fellowship, in some sense, is like an addict, in the sense that the fellowship will grow in very much the same way as an addict grows in recovery. Makes a lot of mistakes, gets a lot of confusion, a lot of anger, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of guilt, and then slowly gets more and more mature. And I know what the hell I'm talking about. I think I do. But I want to bring it back and get it to be more personal. When I came in, I had no humanity in me. I had a performance. I didn't, as I said, didn't understand the nature of love. I thought love and sex were the same thing. I thought if you attacked somebody sexually, that was an expression of love. I hadn't a clue. I didn't know how to give. I certainly knew how to take. I don't know why, I just didn't understand what life was, what it was about. And I think, and I've recognised it in many, many addicts, that I had deep inside me a deep spiritual yearning. And I don't mean a religious yearning. I don't even mean a God yearning. I mean a yearning to be a good person. I think throughout all the silliness and the bullying and the lying and the cheating, underneath it all, I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to do what I've learned to do in NA, do the loving thing in my life. My mother taught me how to behave. My mother taught me what was good and what was not. But I'd forgotten it. I love that expression, spiritual principles, openness, honesty, and honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I thought it was to do with cathedrals and priests and sin and confession and all that rubbish. I was very frightened of this whole God concept. It still can make me nervous. Higher power, I can dig. I can dig higher power. I can dig love. I can dig doing the loving thing. It took me a long, long time to learn to listen. It took me a long, long time to learn to listen. It took me a long time to learn to enjoy the pleasure of being wrong. the relief of being wrong is tremendous when you've had to be right for 30 or 40 years. It's such a relief. Let it go. You know, life is very different today. I have an extended family, a wonderful extended family. Recently, we had a big wedding in Dublin, and there were relatives who came over from America, relatives from Ireland, from England, from all over the shop, with old people, young people, grandchildren, all sorts, all piled into a hotel with a riotous party going on, and a surprising number of people in recovery in that family. I'd been married in the 60s to a woman who was described as the most schizophrenic alcoholic that the hospital ever come across. And she was immensely cruel, and I didn't understand the cruelty. You know that thing when, you know, you've had a dinner party and everybody's saying, "Oh, goodbye, goodbye, how lovely that you came. Wasn't it wonderful to see you? Goodbye, yes, see you again soon." Shut the door. "I saw you." And that would sometimes go on for 2 days. The point of the story was that I was very much wounded by that in that relationship. And I hadn't seen her for many years. And there she was in a wheelchair, having had a stroke. And I went up and I took one look at her, a woman who had really disliked her, and I just burst into tears of compassion. It was extraordinary. I couldn't believe it. This tremendous feeling came pouring out of me of compassion and love for her. So her daughter had explained, her daughter by another marriage had explained how she'd been abused by her father when she was a child, and it made complete sense to me. And forgiveness came, not for very long, but for a good 3/4 of an hour, a good hour. I don't want to hang with her. I don't want to hang out with her. But it was a wonderful experience to feel really strong feelings, having spent a large part of my life hiding from them, running away from them, and denying them. And the richness, I mean, what is it, this game? We did it. We took the drugs. We did it. We're the ones that used. You know, and then what happens? We use and abuse until it hurts so much, and then we turn around and we ask for help, and help is there, and we give each other help, and we recover. And suddenly life is given to us. And it's a great deal, really, when you think about it. I mean, we could have sort of stuck working in a bank for 40 years, having a really miserable time, going around hacking people to pieces. You know, so it is an extraordinary idea, this whole notion of addiction, of having a really good time and taking it so far that it destroys us and everybody else around us. And then we hold up our hands and help is available. And who do we go to for help? We don't go to professors or geniuses, we go to each other. You know, that's what's extraordinary. That's what a spiritual fellowship is. It's this extraordinary communal spiritual fellowship between a bunch of addicts caring, giving a fuck, caring for a change, loving for a change, finding out that there is a difference between love and sexual aggression. And it slowly and gradually and almost inevitably enriches my life. And above all, I think it gives me a lot of peace of mind. I'm not saying my life is without problems, it isn't without problems. But it's without the insanity of letting it all weigh you down, weigh me down and drive me insane. I'm very lucky. I have 3 children. I have 5 or 6 grandchildren. 5 grandchildren. At this wedding, I had an ex-wife, an ex-old lady on each side of me. You know, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. And we're friends, that's the main thing. You know. I'm very proud to have been a member of Narcotics Anonymous. and to continue to be so. And I consider myself very lucky because I like meetings. And that is luck. I went through the period of hating them until I heard an American woman. There's always some American woman. It's kind of the really annoying thing when you're sitting there criticising everybody at the meeting. If you spot it, you've got it. If you spot it, you've got it. Look at that fat fucker over there, worried about your weight. You can't get away with a damn thing. If you spot it, you've got it. Which brings me back to service. There is a danger inherent in service. I call it service junkiedom. Those of you who do a lot of service, be wary. You might begin to think you know something. You might begin to think that your way of doing it is the way. It is incredibly painful. I sat at a service conference in London 20 years ago, at least. I was sitting there, my bike was leaning up against the wall, and I was sitting there, and almost like a kind of Buddhist thing, I saw myself sitting there interfering with every single subject that came up for discussion, with every single response to that subject. And I was driving myself and everybody else crazy. And I saw this happening and I couldn't stop. I just was absolutely neurotically screwed into it. And eventually I just got up and I walked out, I got on my bike and I rode away. And I didn't come back near that group for 4 months. And when I came back, it had increased in numbers and thrived. It was doing very, very well indeed. But the pain of being a secretary and sitting there, and somebody's standing up, you want them sitting down, and somebody's talking, you want them to shut up. How long, I had to teach myself, how long am I prepared to give this person, how much time am I going to give them to save their life? I mean, how dare they save their life at the risk of boring me? It's that fatuous. But it is a danger. I do warn people engaged in service of service junkiedom, because it can happen. And sometimes it's a good idea to step back down. I mean, this is in no way to deny the incredible service that's done. I don't know what it's like now, but certainly in the first 20 years of NA, most of the service was done by people in their first 3 or 4 or 5 years in recovery. Most of it. It is, when it's, well, like everything, when it's treated with respect, it's a glorious thing. And it opens us up, and it's like the first time you do the tea. You've actually got to talk to people. You've actually even try to learn their names. I've got an excuse now because I'm an old fart. I can forget people's names. But one has to engage, and this has always been the fear, I think, certainly with me, of engaging with other people. Without service, the fellowship would drown. I went to San Jose in California as a guest speaker. I did 2 guest speaker trips to the States. Then they rang up and said, "Would you come again?" I said no, because I didn't want to be a circuit speaker. I've seen people come over from the States to London and cry at the same place in their stories. Always look out for that person that sits at an angle in the meeting, or insists always on sitting in the same place. Watch those fuckers. They're dangerous. There's always that one, isn't there, that sits there lump. Gets in there at dawn to set the chairs up so she or he can leave the hat on the chair. Sit at an angle because they're slightly better than everybody else. One of the great things that keep me alive about Narcotics Anonymous and the other 12-step fellowships is the deep democracy that underpins it. These fellowships are the only democratic institution in the 20th and 21st century that have survived. We survive because of anonymity and a refusal to accept outside contributions. I think the structure of these fellowships is probably the most important piece of political, philosophical, spiritual writing of the 20th century. I really do believe that. And I'm a political person, not party political, but I read, I think in those terms. And to be a part of it is extraordinary. Nobody has been able to sell this lot down the Swanee. Nobody. And we continue to grow and flourish. And I am really proud to have been a part of it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dudley. And with that, we're going to have a 10-minute break, and it is going to be a 10-minute break. We're going to start in 10 minutes. Dudley's actually going to be leaving us now, so if you say goodbyes now. Thank you, Dudley. These yours, Dudley? I don't know. And this is yours, isn't it?